the Buddha's definition of an ignoble life and why you might be living it. In Western languages, we have separate words for heart and mind, but in most of the countries where Buddhism has spread, they don't have separate words. They use one word for both. Even in the ones where they do have two words like Thai, they have sit for mind and kiai for heart, the words are pretty interchangeable. This reflects the Buddha's insight that there's really not that clear a dividing line between your heart and your mind. Your emotions have thoughts. Your thoughts have emotions. The big problem for the heart, of course, is suffering. And it's hard to separate that from thinking. As the Buddha said, our first response to suffering is bewilderment, trying to figure it out. Why is this happening? Then the second response is a thought too. Is there anybody out there who knows a way to put an end to this suffering? So the suffering already has us thinking. In fact, you might say that if we didn't suffer, we wouldn't be thinking. It's because of suffering that we're spurred on to figure things out. Isaac Newton once said that if the orbit of the moon hadn't been so erratic and complex, mathematics wouldn't have developed as quickly as it had. To figure out the orbit of the moon, people had to come up with very sophisticated math. The question is, why were they trying to figure out the orbit of the moon? Because of astrology. They thought that the movements of the moon were going to have an impact on their lives. More thoughts based on the question of whether you were going to suffer or not. So, all our thinking comes from suffering. It's an issue both of the heart and the mind together. And from the Buddha's point of view, it's not a question of heart versus mind. It's simply that our thinking is confused when we come to the issue of suffering. There are so many things in the world that we've figured out. But when it comes to why the heart is suffering, our thinking gets very vague, convoluted, and backwards. What he's trying to do in his teaching is to give us some insight into how you can really think about suffering in a way that thinks straight and does put an end to it. That's what the Four Noble Truths are all about. They speak to this problem of the heart, which is the problem of suffering, but they apply your mind to it. If we think in terms of mind and heart being separate, the Four Noble Truths try to get them back together again so that your mind can talk to your heart in a way that puts an end to the heart's big problem. There are four noble truths. Why are they four? Why are they noble? Why are they true? They're four because suffering is a problem with a cause. We much prefer to have it end. That's what the truths are for, to put an end to suffering. That, together with the Buddha's insight that it's going to have to come about through action, and action is based on desire. So to arrive at the result of putting an end to suffering, you need to start with skillful causes, skillful desires, skillful actions. If suffering is the result, the causes are unskillful desires, unskillful actions. So there are two things, actions and results, divided into two types, skillful and unskillful. That's why the truths are four. Why are they noble? The word for noble, ariya, has two meanings in Pali. One is something higher than the normal, something to aspire to. In this case, the Buddha says, our lives are a search, the search to put an end to suffering. It comes from the bewilderment. We end up searching either for something that is going to age, grow ill, and die, or for something that won't. If we're looking for things that age, grow ill, and die, we're going to just pile on more suffering. We're not getting to where we want to go. That kind of search, the Buddha said, is ignoble. He tried a couple of ignoble searches in the course of his practice. He started out pursuing sensual pleasures and found that they didn't lead to where he wanted to go. He tried self-torment, thinking that if he could purify himself simply by enduring pain, that would put an end to suffering. But it didn't. It was only when he found the middle way that he was able to reach the end of suffering, going to something that doesn't age, doesn't grow ill, doesn't die. And part of that way is right view. That's what the Four Noble Truths are, the terms of right view. So these are the truths that guide us in that noble search. It's one of the reasons why the truths are noble. Another reason is that they're universal. That's the other meaning of the word Arya in Pali, universal. The Buddha compares these noble truths to what he calls individual truths or personal truths, things that may be true for you, but not true for other people. He's not interested in teaching those. He's teaching something that's true for everybody, no matter how old you are, what your background is, what your gender is, or any of the other things that we use to divide us into different groups. This is something we all have in common, why we suffer and how we can put an end to it. The details of how we suffer will be individual, but the cure is always the same. Part of the cure is understanding that you're suffering not because of things outside, but because of your own craving. You have to look at the cause. The cause isn't out there, it's in your craving. And the suffering itself, as the Buddha said, is in a place you might not expect. It's in your clinging. What this means is you're actually doing the suffering. You're holding on, feeding on things. And the act of feeding is suffering. That's counterintuitive. We tend to think of suffering as something that hits us. We're on the passive receiving end. But, as the Buddha pointed out, that's not the case. Seeing things in this way, you realize that the path to the end of suffering has to attack the problem at the cause. As I was saying this afternoon, you go into a house. You see that it's full of smoke, but if you simply try putting out the smoke, it's never going to end. You've got to find the cause, the fire. You put that out, and that's the end of the problem with the smoke. The approach we adopt on this path that we're practicing is to put an end to suffering by putting an end to craving. Part of that is through developing right concentration so that we can create a steady sense of well-being. You sit here with the breath coming in and going out. Try to breathe in a way that, at the very least, feels okay. If you learn how to protect that sense of being okay right here, you'll find that it'll grow into a sense of ease. That sense of ease not only gives you a good place to stay and encouragement on the path, but it also allows you to look at the problem of suffering without being overwhelmed by it, without feeling threatened by it, because you know you've got a good place you can retreat to. From this place, you can see your cravings not as your friends, but as your enemies. That way, you can let them go. So, these are the truths that help us look into the problem of suffering so that we can solve the problem at the cause rather than solving it at the end. Many years back, when I was in Thailand, I read an article about some high-ranking government officials from Bangkok going out to a far distant part of the country. There was a little school there, and the kids looked so poor as they lined up in front of the school to receive these important visitors from Bangkok. So the visitors arranged for them to have school uniforms so that they'd look nice the next time visitors came out. That's attacking the problem at the result. You have to look into why the families are so poor to begin with. Maybe you can do something about that. But they tried solving the problem at the result, which doesn't solve much at all. You want to solve it at the cause. Another aspect of why the truths are noble is because they have you step back from your craving, step back from your clinging. These are the things that we invest ourselves in most. We actually identify with these things. As a result, we go around obeying our thirst, as that old Sprite commercial used to say. But learning how to step back from our thirst, to step back from our clinging and feeding, that's a noble act. That's really what makes us human beings as opposed to animals. It gives us some nobility. At the same time, these truths do provide guidance to the path that truly leads to that goal. A goal where there's no aging, no illness, no death. That's why they're true. But they're an interesting kind of truth. When the Buddha uses the word truth, he uses it in two senses. One is statements about the way things are. The other is the actual reality, or the actual experience that the statements describe. When we first encounter the noble truths, they're words, but they're pointing to something that's already happening in our experience, the suffering, the craving, and the potentials for the path. So, when the Buddha says that you abandon the truth of the cause of suffering, you don't abandon the statement about it. You abandon the actual experience of the cause. When he says to comprehend the truth of suffering, again, it's not simply a matter of comprehending the words. You're actually trying to comprehend, when there's suffering in the mind, what's actually going on. In developing the fourth noble truth, again, you don't develop the words. You develop the qualities in the mind that are called for by the path. But eventually, as you develop the path and perform all the other duties appropriate to the truths, you find that the four noble truths take you to something beyond them. There's an interesting passage where Anathapindika has gone to see some wanderers from other sects. It's early in the morning. The monks are out on their alms round. It's too early to visit either them or the Buddha, so he says to himself, "Well, I'll see what these people have to say." He goes and listens to their doctrines, and he points out to them that all their doctrines are put together, fabricated, because anything fabricated is stressful. In holding on to their doctrines, they're holding on to stress. Then they ask him, "Well, what's your view?" He says, "Whatever is fabricated, put together, is stressful. Whatever is stressful is not me, not mine, not myself." So they try to turn the tables on him and say, "Well, you're holding on to that doctrine. That too is holding on to stress." And he says, "No, by holding on to this and practicing in line with it, I get beyond it." This is why the four noble truths are special. They take you to a truth that's beyond them because they force you to look at what your mind is doing, to see everything in the mind as processes. When you get involved with pleasure, where does it come from? Where does it go? When you're dealing with pain, where did the pain come from? And where does it go? In other words, what did you do to give rise to these things? And what do they lead you to do? You look at the causes for whatever's unskillful and you learn how to let go of them. But then you realize that the guidance you've gotten from the four noble truths, that too is something fabricated. That too is something simply put together. It's still not the deathless. So you look at it as a process as well. This is the part where, as Ajahn Mun said, all the four noble truths become one, with one duty. Let go through dispassion. In the letting go, you finally get to that noble goal. Not the true statement about the goal, but the true experience of the goal itself. That's where the noble truths take you, and that's the point where both the heart and mind are totally satisfied. As Ajahn Suwat said, once you achieve that ultimate happiness, then that's what it is. Ultimate happiness, totally satisfying. You have no questions about who's experiencing or why or what. The experience is sufficient in and of itself. That speaks to the heart's deepest desire, to put an end to suffering. To end suffering, we have to learn how to think about it properly. This is why the Dhamma is called the language of the heart. Not because it comes out of the heart, but because it's the part of the mind that can speak to the heart in a way that helps it understand what its problems are. Another phrase you might use for this is the intelligent heart or the thinking heart. It's willing to listen to that language, to follow through with the instructions, and to find that totally satisfactory goal where all thinking can stop because it's served its purpose. This is the most noble thing we can aim for. Noble because it makes us behave in an honorable way, and noble because it's universal. It's something we all can aim for. It's open to us all. A while back, I was reading some scholars saying that the four noble truths are true only for noble ones. Well, how do you get to be a noble one? You follow the four noble truths. So, they're already true statements for you. They're true for all of us. They offer to all of us the help we're looking for in our bewilderment, in our desire to find a way to put an end to the suffering. That's the Buddha's gift. We simply have to follow their guidance to find the experience of the truth to which they point. An entire practice, a practice that really is worth giving your life to. A few weeks ago, I was in Thailand. While I was there, I went to pay my respects to Ajahn Uthai, a student of Ajahn Fun. When I arrived, there was already a group of lay people visiting with him. He asked me a couple of questions about life here at Wat Metta. And one of them was, when Westerners come to the monastery, what do they come for? He'd been talking about virtue and generosity to the lay people, so I mentioned that a lot of people don't come thinking about generosity and virtue at the very beginning. Their first motivation for coming is to find peace of mind. One of the people in the other group said, "Ah, Westerners, they go straight to the top, right from the very beginning." And Ajahn Uthai's response was, "What do you mean straight to the top? Even common animals want peace of mind. If you want to be a human being, you have to develop virtue, good qualities of the mind, good qualities of the character. That's what differentiates us from common animals." So what are those good qualities? There's a list called the 10 perfections. They include discernment, which is primarily a quality of the mind, but the other 9 are all qualities of the heart: generosity, virtue, renunciation, persistence, endurance, truth, determination, goodwill, and equanimity. Goodwill stands out as good-heartedness. A lot of the others, though, are types of strength, which we may not associate with a good heart, but for the heart to be truly good requires strength. If you start out with good intentions but you can't carry them through, they don't really mean much. Goodness requires strength to do good things that are hard. The ability to make yourself want to do things that you might not want to do, but you know are going to be good for you in the long term, and the ability to say no to things that you like to do, but you know are going to be bad for you in the long term. In other words, when your discernment points out the fact that the consequences are going to be good or bad for certain actions, you've got to look at your emotions. Are they on the side of what your discernment is telling you or not? Sometimes they are, sometimes not. When they're on the side of your discernment, then there's no real problem. It's when they're at cross purposes. That's when it's a real test of your character. That's how we should measure our self-worth. As the Buddha said, the sign of your discernment as a mature person is your ability to make yourself want to do things that you don't like doing, but will give good results in the long term, and to make yourself want to say no to things you like doing but are going to give bad results in the long term. So notice, you're not just going against your likes. You're trying to change your likes, trying to make yourself want to do these things. This means you have to be able to point out to yourself the good consequences of difficult actions and how happy you'll be when the good consequences come. This is one of the reasons why we begin the practice with generosity. It's practice in delayed gratification and also in the realization that some pleasures are better than others. The pleasure that comes from seeing someone else enjoy something you gave to them is a better pleasure than simply enjoying it yourself. The knowledge that you've done something good is a better pleasure than the pleasure that comes from just gobbling up what you've got. Notice that there is pleasure here. All too often we're told that to be a good person you have to deny your own happiness for the sake of other people's. But then, after a while, you start wondering, why is their happiness more important than yours? From the Buddha's point of view, though, the person who works for his or her own well-being and the well-being of others at the same time is the best sort of person, better than one who works only for the well-being of others. So you've got to learn how to find your happiness in being good at the same time. You do things for goodness' sake and also for happiness' sake together. For goodness' sake. We have that phrase in English, for goodness' sake. It's been repeated so many times that it's become just a matter of emphasis. It's lost its real meaning. The real meaning is that you do something because it would lead to good results, for the sake of the goodness it would yield. That's your motivation. So ideally, you want to learn how to get your likes in line with what's good. This is one of the reasons why we meditate, not just to give the mind a peaceful place to stay, but also to give it strength. The goodness of meditation requires endurance, determination, and persistence. If you don't have a source for internal strength like this, it's going to be hard to carry through with your good intentions. This is why concentration is not just one aspect of the path. The Buddha placed it at the center of the path to give you strength to carry through with the rest of the path. You try to get your heart well rested, get your mind well rested, with a sense of well-being, ease, and rapture, so that the heart and mind will be strong enough to do the work that the rest of the path demands. And these are things you can do. You can make the mind settle down. Recently, I was at a place in Malaysia where the people had been taught that you can't do concentration. It just happens on its own, kind of comes up and whacks you across the head. All you can do is sit there very patiently, waiting for it to come. But actually, the first jhana contains directed thought and evaluation. These are things you do. You direct your thoughts to the breath, and then you evaluate it. How does it feel? Does it feel good enough to stay with for a while? If it doesn't, how could it be made to feel that good? You experiment, you try things out, you ask questions, you look for answers. These are all things you do. Then, when you find something that seems good, you can stick with it for a while to see if it really is good, or how long it's going to be good. And when you find a way of breathing that really feels good, you allow that sense of pleasure to spread through the body, down the spine, out the legs, down the nerves of the arms, starting from the area around the heart, down through the different organs and down to the intestines. Try to sensitize yourself. The more sensitive you are to this area of your awareness, the more satisfying it becomes. As you make yourself sensitive and then breathe in a way that satisfies that sensitivity, you develop a pleasure that's more and more refined. It's a pleasure that's good in and of itself, but it's also good in the sense that it's not harming anybody, and it gives you the strength to look at the questions you're asking yourself as you go through daily life about what to do and what should be done. This is a basic distinction in the Buddha's teachings. We hear so much about the Buddha's teachings on non-duality, or his avoidance of dualities. But one of his duties as a teacher, he said, was to give you a basis for deciding what should and shouldn't be done. And underlying that duty is the basic principle that your actions really do matter. They make a difference. You have the choice to act in one way or another, and those actions have consequences. If you were to deny your power of choice, or the fact that your actions had consequences, then there wouldn't be any idea of should or should not. You just act on your impulses, with no choice in the matter. But you do have choices, and actions do have consequences. So, if you want true happiness, those are the conditions for the Buddha's shoulds. Then you want to be very careful about what you actually do. Ask yourself, do I want to do what I should be doing? This is where you have to learn how to talk to yourself. Make yourself see the goodness that comes, the happiness that comes from doing the right thing. Part of that happiness is a solid sense of self-worth. People who indulge in all their impulses find that, after a while, they have very little sense of self-worth at all, or they have to blow up an inflated sense of self-worth that doesn't really have anything to do with reality. But if you can look at your actions and see, I did this and nobody was harmed. I found happiness this way and nobody was harmed. I found happiness in this way and other people benefited too. That kind of realization gives you a sense of your worth as a person. A lot of well-being comes around that sense of worth. You want to learn how to appreciate it. This means changing the balance of power inside. There are some voices in the mental committee that are rebellious, but when you follow them, where do they lead? A lot of them are like the friends who try to get you to do something against the law and then, when the police come, go running away. In other words, something inside you wants to do something unskillful and you give in. But that particular defilement is not the one that's going to suffer. You're the one that's going to suffer. So you have to see the value of acting in such a way that you can look back on your actions and realize that nobody was harmed, and that in some cases, people were helped. There lies your value as a human being. That's your value as a mature human being. This is one of the reasons why we come for goodness sake, to figure out what would be the good thing to do so that we can regard ourselves as good people. So look carefully at that list in the perfections: endurance, determination, renunciation. Renunciation here doesn't just mean giving things up. Every case where the Buddha talks about renouncing something, he adds that there's always something gained in return. The primary case of renunciation is just sitting here giving up your sensual thoughts, learning how to focus on the breath, to focus on the sense of the body as you feel it from within, and learning how to find pleasure there. Because that search for pleasure really is strengthening and is totally harmless. The search for pleasures outside, or the fascination of thinking about what a wonderful meal you had and how the next meal is going to be really good, that really weakens you. It makes your happiness depend on things being a certain way. You become a hothouse plant. You can live only under certain conditions. Your happiness can survive only under certain conditions. Whereas if you learn how to find happiness with the breath, you can be anywhere. Sitting on a bus, in a doctor's office. They could throw you in prison, and you could still learn how to breathe well, and you'd have your own personal sense of well-being, a source of well-being that nobody can take away from you. That gives you strength because it enables you to put up with all kinds of conditions that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, and your goodness can survive all kinds of conditions because of that. So, we're here for peace of mind, but it's a peace of mind that's also goodness. Happiness and goodness together. That's what makes it really special. Anybody can find peace of mind in just about any way, but when you add those extra conditions onto it, it makes it something of real value because you've learned how to find your happiness in a responsible way. You can look at your actions and see nothing that you would criticize yourself for. That means your peace of mind doesn't require putting up huge walls of denial. It's also peace of mind that can withstand all kinds of external changes, because you've made certain qualities in your mind unchanging. So, think of the all-around aspect of the goodness we're looking for. Goodness and happiness together, and the deep peace of mind that comes from that. After all, release is the ultimate peace. That's the kind of peace that common animals can't find, but human beings can, because the release the Buddha taught depends on all the factors of the path. They include virtue and, as he said, they're founded on generosity. Stingy people, he said, can't attain hana, can't attain nibbana. In other words, it's the kind of peace that's available only to generous people, virtuous people. So yes, we are looking for peace of mind, but we've got some extra conditions. We're doing it for the sake of happiness, and we're also doing it for goodness' sake. Always keep these many dimensions in mind, because they make the practice whole, an entire practice, a practice that really is worth giving your life to.